have a slab of maple here. Now I'm not real good at identifying woods, but sometimes there are certain characteristics that really give it away. For instance, on this one, I wrote maple on it after I got it. It helps a lot. Now it's got a nice crotch area in here, which I'm hoping is going to put out some nice grain for me. And I've taken my beam compass and I've drawn the largest circle I can on here, which happens to be 14-inch diameter. I'm going to take this to the bandsaw, cut that out, and then I'll be back for the next step. I hope you'll stick around. And there's my blank. It's 14 inches in diameter, a little over 2 inches thick. Now I'm going to have to take it down a little bit when I true up the outside, so it'll probably be down to somewhere around 13.5 inches. I just put it through the drum sander. I didn't have to do that, but I just wanted to see the figure and let you see what it looks like. I think it's gorgeous. This is going to be the top or inside of the platter, and it's got some fairly serious checking and cracking. This one goes right through, but it can just barely see that it's there. So at some point, I'm going to have to fill these with something. And in the meantime, I have to bear in mind the fact that if I overdo it on the speed, this could fly apart. So my next step, because this is going to be the top, I'm going to find the center and put a faceplate on here so that I can turn a recess on the back side and put my largest jaws into that. So I'll put that faceplate on and get it on the lathe. Now the first thing I want to do is make a recess to fit the jaws on my large chuck. I'm going to start this with a 3 1/4 inch Forstner bit. I actually need 3 3/8 of an inch, but this is the closest I have without going up to 3 1/2, which certainly won't do it. I've turned this down to 100 RPM. I do not like to overheat the bits. Now let me start this recess. I increased the speed to 150. It was bogging just a little bit at 100. And as you can see, that's just very, very close to fitting. Not quite. I'm going to clean this up now with my parting tool and use a scraper to clean this up. Put some decorative rings in there. And then I'm going to start shaping this. I believe it was about 3 years ago I had the opportunity to take a class with Cindy Drozda. And I bought this tool from her. I believe she calls it her square end recess scraper. And I'm going to use that to enlarge this just a little bit and to clean this area up and see how well this will work. I need to raise this just a little bit. I'm going to try this at 500 RPM. And that's good size, like that. Lower this back down a little bit more. And try cleaning this up. Well, that's not looking too bad. A little bit of sanding should take care of that. Just going to put my skew chisel on its side and try to do a few rings here. All right, a little rough there. I'm going to sand this off camera and then I'll be back. The more I look at these cracks, the less I want to try turning it without somehow making it a little more secure. So I'm using some quick set epoxy. It says to mix it for at least a minute, and I've been doing that. Now I'm going to put this into these cracks. I'll likely turn away most of it later, but I'd rather have some in there just to make sure I have a little more chance of not having this fly apart. I have a little confession to make. I have never claimed to have a good memory, but sometimes it gets ridiculous. When I put this epoxy in here, it said to let it sit for 16 hours before using it. Well, I'm not the type who could just let it sit for 16 hours and do nothing, so I set this aside, went on to another project. In a day or two, I must have covered it up with something, and then I covered that up with something, and pretty soon it was buried under a bunch of stuff, and I forgot about it. And yesterday I decided to clean up my shop, and I found it. So I checked, and I had the video I'd previously shot on my computer, and that was 14 months ago. So anyway, it's got to be set by now. It's got to be well cured epoxy. So I'm going to take it over to the lathe and let's do some work on this. 800 RPM, 3/8 inch bowl gouge. Definitely some chip out. Going to be a lot of sanding here, starting at 80 grit, I think. There's an area right here that a branch must have been coming off of. Pretty gnarly. I'm going to fill that with CA glue and sawdust, and the same with this crack, which lines up with one of the epoxy filled cracks. So I'm going to fill those, do some sanding, and I'll be back. First thing I have to do is use some 80 grit sandpaper and sand here so I can collect the dust from these sheets of paper and then use that for filling these spots. 1000 RPM. Want to knock down some of these areas with the CA glue. Alright, that's all ready to be sanded. Now I need to do the same thing around this edge. And that's looking pretty good. Time to put some sandpaper to this, then I'll be back. I will be really surprised if the video shots of this do justice This is just gorgeous. The red streaks in there. I sanded it to 240 grit. Then I put on a single coat of sanding sealer. Sanded that back to 240. Then I used Axe abrasive paste, followed by his buffing paste, the polishing paste, and I'm really pleased with this. So now, I hope I can reverse this, do the other side without screwing it up. There's some really impressive chipping right here on the edge, so I have to take this back just a little bit. I brought the tail stock up for some support, and I'm going to start turning this at 1000 RPM. Might seem a little fast for something this large, but with that support, I have confidence. Alright, that's cleaned up that chipping quite well. I'm going to actually turn this down to 750 RPM. It is a little high at this edge. Got some chipping going on here. I'll have to figure that out. That shear cutting seems to have cleaned up that chipping quite nicely. Anything else right on the edge here can be sanded out. This crack where the epoxy is in looks real good right here. Now I don't know how deep it actually went in there. I'm going to leave the rim about that wide, so I'll start turning from the inside now. See what we come up with here. I'm going to stay at 750 RPM. I think I'll be doing some filling in there if this doesn't fly apart on me first. I think I'll just check to make sure how tight this is. No problem. This is not just beating up the edge on my tool, it's beating me up. I think I'm going to try a little bit with a scraper, the carbide tool. Now for me, turning with one of these carbide scrapers is not near as much fun as using a gouge, but there are times when it certainly is a lot easier, and this is one of those times. want to see if perhaps turning this in reverse will give me less chip out in this area. I believe it's better. It's a long way from perfect, but I think that's an improvement. All right, I'm going to have to take this off, do some CA glue and sawdust in this area and a little bit in here, a couple of spots, and then I think it's going to be just a matter of sanding. And there's the finished product. I'm very pleased with this. I like this little bit of natural edge on here. It's a little over 13 3/4 of an inch diameter. It's got some beautiful figure in here. Shows off some of the red streaks from the Manitoba Maple or box elder if you're in the US. Quite pleased with this. But have you ever noticed that sometimes defects don't show up until you put the finish on? Right in the center, I had about a 1-inch diameter scratch that I didn't even see until I put the finish on. So I had to resand that spot, put on the sanding sealer, finish it again with Tom Axley's pastes, and now I'm quite happy. I'm just wondering if this wouldn't look better full of Smarties. Maybe something to try. Well, thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, click the like button. Let me know that I'm doing something right. And if you haven't subscribed before, I'd appreciate it if you do. Hope you'll come back next time. Now, between now and then, have a great day in your shop and be safe. Take care now.